It's another fine edition of the Squeaky Wheel. Welcome, folks, to our conversation. Lawrence, as always, I can't say thank you enough, but I'm going to jump right into it. It's National Beauty and Barber Week. So for all of you who are going out to spend that time and a few extra dollars at the spa or towards getting those haircuts, make sure you take care of your barber and your beautician. Maybe that's probably not the right term for it. I'll have to look that one up.
Well, you're looking at me kind of funny when you say barber because people can't see.
Yeah, that's right. They can't see that part of it.
I got a beautiful beard on right now. So.
And it's National Beer Lovers Day. So make sure you take advantage of that opportunity. While this weather is nice and hot here down in southern Alberta, seemingly on fire in most places around North America right now, take that opportunity. Support your local business. Lawrence, first thing I want to say is that there's a tremendous loss to all of the families who were affected by these horrific murders that were happening in Saskatchewan. Let's hope that we're already aware that some of it's coming to a resolution, and in some cases there's still some manhunt work that's got to be done. But let's hope for the families, for all of the challenges, for the losses, for the fear that it creates in our community. Our thoughts and prayers are with everybody who's been affected by that. Our thoughts are also with those in the Ukraine. There's still no shortage of damage. There's the fear that it creates based on the energy that's in the sense of nuclear risk. I don't want us to fearmonger everything. I think we still need to do our part of sharing the conversation, but our thoughts are with those families. Now let's jump into some of the positive things that are happening, especially within the Métis community, Lawrence. If you look up the Voyageur Voice, which you can find on albertametis.com, or if you subscribe, you'll get all those emails. Dental support. Should have a quick look at Lawrence, see how things look there, because your smile's fabulous.
Yeah, we got to go to Edmonton and get that work done. So.
Well, I think they're creating a number of opportunities, but when I look over at you, it's like that's been taken care of. There's a lot of good work that's been done there. Community wellness advocates, and that's a really important one. I'm speaking to a whole bunch of the physicians and health providers at the end of this month. I'm co-hosting an event. And one of the things I really want to share is that in the Métis community, we have a community wellness advocate.
Yeah.
This is a spot where our members can reach out to get guidance, specifically on mental health, but also guidance on the actions of health within our community.
Well, there's so many different things. I mean, we do tobacco reduction. We do sort of screening for cancer. We do all these things, right? So yeah, it's good that we need these community wellness people because they can help navigate the system, what we have in place currently.
Yeah, what funding's available, right? If you don't have that resource, and if you look at the model that was done forever, and we don't speak on behalf of First Nations in a way that's not just positive or some recognition, but the notion that for the longest time, healthcare was doled out by the RCMP. Right, within First Nation communities, they were sort of the advocate. They were the kind of manager. And then now the Métis community comes along, and we have greater resources because we're, recognized provincially when it comes to how our health is managed. But a lot of people are not familiar with navigating health.
Well, I don't know. I think it's kind of neither here nor there. Some First Nations have a lot more than us, and some. We, on the other hand, sometimes do things and we're sort of getting to those places where we're getting access. Before we didn't have dental, First Nations had that dental for a long time, but now we're starting to get it. But, even community wellness is about creating awareness on what we do have and what we have to offer, because people are sitting at home and they're struggling to go here and there. They don't realize that there's somebody here in the Métis Nation that can help assist them to navigate. And if we don't have anything in place, they can do referrals too.
Right, actually, and that's really important that you recognize that. It's about advocating for what we have within our community already. Here are resources that are available.
That's right.
But outside of those resources, and for some people, it may not be the same for everyone. And within blended families, you may have resources that are available to community members, but then there's also members who may not fall within the purview of the Métis community. But we have advocates that could help us guide somebody through the wellness. And our family resources, these are ones that I think I've really had to share within my own community, with my own family, within my own little network, saying there's opportunities when it comes to sports, when it comes to educational dollars, when it comes to the preschool programs in order to bring resources to those family members.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we do backpack programs to, even giving gift cards so people can go to Walmart and get their stuff for school. But all that stuff, we kind of have in place, and getting that word out is very, very important. And I always look at us as, one day having our own family resource centers as well as our own clinics, right, to take care of our own people in terms of health, and then also take care of the families too.
Well, and maybe that's the next step that will, as we work our way through the Constitution, if we enact that as a decision within our community, perhaps we'll have that as a resource. We could ask the government or direct our government to say, well, let's here's how different we are as a community. Let's try and put dollars towards this and allow us to be a bigger part of that conversation.
Yeah, and I always think allow us to actually manage it, because if I look at what we have out there for family resource centers and what we have there for clinics, and some of them are Aboriginal, our Métis people tend to kind of walk by it because we don't identify as First Nations, so they figure there's nothing for them there. But they don't realize there is once they go through the door. But they tend to just steer away from it, right?
Right. And they're not aware that there may be the welcome mat there.
That's right. Absolutely right.
So definitely something we have to continue. And that's part of the role that we have here. We're trying to share that conversation with our community. That's the reason you listen. I like to think it's for our humorous sort of anecdotes and our color and our character. And yet, no, it's probably not that. For students out there are grants. There's the Art Lirondelle for construction and trades. There's the Delia Gray for any area of study. There's the Pearl Calhassan for any area of study. Gary Pruden, music and sports studies. Oh, I should throw some applications into that one. Ernest Potra for any area of study, and Tom Ghostkeeper for justice-related studies. And if you go to the albertametis.com, you're going to find the area when it comes to scholarships. You can apply for this. Mention it to anybody within our community that you should be applying. There's dollar values attached to these, but it doesn't mean that is the limit of these dollar values. Especially if you also go to, and we tout it every week, Rupert's Land Institute. They actually have a hospitality program that they have developed. It's 12-week long. And at the end of that, you will have a certificate. You will have a stepping stone towards the opportunity to work within these industries.
Yeah, and look up Métis Scholar Awards. I sit on the Métis Education Foundation, but definitely look at that within your institution. If you're going into university or post-secondary, there are scholarships at those schools. Don't just walk by. Even those, like I just said, kind of Indigenous offices, they will have the information there. So just walk in the doors and let them know that you're Métis, say you're looking for a scholarship or something to assist you in school, and I'm pretty sure they'll point you in the right direction.
Right, and within these Indigenous support areas, there's going to be counselors who are your advocate. Their whole job is to share the information with you, maybe even help you, guide you, to give you a few ideas on what you should be putting down within your application. And you want to have that. You want to know your Métis number. You need to know where you live, where you are within your community. If you volunteer, make sure you put all that kind of information in, because that's going to be what helps the people who are adjudicating your scholarship decision. They want this money to be used. So make sure you get that information in there.
And also be timely. Yeah. Don't go to school and then expect a scholarship.
Right.
Your expectation is pretty limited. You got to plan well in advance.
Yeah.
Like if you're going to start school in September, have everything done in, at least January, February, March, knowing the landscape of where scholarships are, when their deadlines are. But don't have an expectation that you start school in September, you're going to get money.
Right, that you're getting money. Right. Don't rely on that.
That's right.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. One of the other things I wanted to bring up was there was sent to me Amy Christensen. She's Métis, represents this very strong relationship within the cultural burning. Well, she had sent me some information about the Indigenous Wildland Firefighter Honor. Now, this is kind of a first time that this has happened. There's recipient nomination forms. You can go to wildfirecanada.com, and they're looking to try and not pick somebody out specifically, but allow or create the honor for the Indigenous community, finding somebody who works within the wildland fire community. Yeah. And I work within that community due to the science that we do regarding my satellite work and environmental monitoring. But I want people to be aware make sure you nominate somebody. Look for these things, just like the scholarships. Pass this information along. The only way that we can continue to, expand the conversation is the more we get involved.
Yeah, and it's unfortunately, but we live in those times now where smoke is going to come on the horizon, and there's a reason. It's not just because, it's 2022 and it's COVID or whatever.
Was that a double entendre that the smoke's going to come on the horizon?
It is true though.
Yeah,
right? It is. You never know, right?
Physically coming on the horizon, but we also know in the future we are continuing to see greater threats when it comes to our environment. That's
right. And I think all of us have a responsibility to be on the lookout for when these things are about to happen, right?
Yeah.
There's people out there that start them.
Right? Oh, there's a lot of people who have been getting caught lately, arsonists.
Yeah.
And they're ruining families, they're ruining industries, they're ruining community because they're causing so much damage.
But also at the same time, there's people who smoke and they throw their butts out. There's people who are not putting their campfires out properly. Like all these things, we have to have a conscience now because things are drier, windier. Things are just going to light up. And pretty soon, we're just going to be engulfed in smoke.
Yeah. And we can only do as much as we can for our community. But if we can continue to do it here, hopefully that will extend to some of these other areas where fires are occurring. And maybe that guidance. In Canada, it's gotten more and more expensive to smoke. That's not necessarily the same everywhere in North America. Yeah. And those cigarette butts that are still getting thrown out there are causing wildfires. It's hard. Maybe that's something that people can't seem to conceptualize is just by throwing out that one near finished, near what you consider extinguished cigarette, but once it sits there and smolders and the wind picks it up and it just heats up enough these dry community areas and starts a fire, how did that happen? Well, you caused that.
Well, just think of all those naked and afraid people that just die for fire and wind, right?
So they should start smoking.
They should really start smoking, yeah.
Carrying some peat with them. With my experience in my World of the Fire career, one of those things that people are completely unaware of is that peat, naturally, as it sits out in the sun, starts to heat.
Right.
And so many fires. Now, if you just put a cigarette butt out in there, you've actually just really increased the likelihood of that starting on fire. And you'd think, how do these spontaneous fires occur? Some are spontaneous because of the sun, the heat, and the peat. Some, just that one cigarette butt. I've seen it many times. Starting roofs on fire because the shingles that are on top, cigarette butt rolls underneath them because people throw them out their windows, gets underneath that the siding that is just cedar shake, sits there heating, starts a fire.
Yeah.
Crazy. You wouldn't think that would happen, but it does. A Northern Alberta First Nation has filed what experts say is the province's first lawsuit claiming cumulative effects from industry, agriculture, settlement that they're so pervasive they violate the band's treaty rights. Boy, that's an interesting one. How do we navigate a notion that new industry, new or historic connection is causing that much effect on people's land? If you look at the water losses that are happening down in the United States, where do we say that and is this how we start the conversation, that the industry, that the use of water is affecting everybody's rights? In this case, it just happens to be coming from Alberta First Nation, but cumulatively, the work that's done, where do you lay blame? How do you find a spot that you could lay blame?
Well, I mean, obviously the only place is, when you sign the treaty, who do you sign the treaty with?
Right.
It's those ones. And usually the government is kind of stands in that sort of realm. Now, how they react to this will be very, very interesting, I think, for treaty people across Canada.
Right.
And even our agreements with the Métis, right? Some of our settlements have distinct agreements. And and it goes all the way back to, our script system, our land base, what we did have, what we don't have anymore, but now Canada's going to be listening to that. These are certain topics we're going to probably bring up. But use of the land and allowing industry to kind of come in, because at the end of the day, government are the ones that either check it yes or no on their projects, right?
Right.
And certainly that, with that sort of system, they're the ones that are kind of responsible. And that treaty relationship relies on them also. So that's where this all lies. But it'll be very interesting if it doesn't make a change. But, I'm pretty sure this is not the only case that's happened in the past.
Right. This is probably something that is just finally being made by the news right now. You're right. There's no way this is the first one. But it might be specific, but also if we don't start the conversation, look how long it took for any Métis rights to have come forward.
Yeah.
Right? The process doesn't move extremely quickly.
Yeah, and I'm sure government is a little nervous too, because
Yeah.
they don't know our viewpoints. Certainly we may come with the same one.
Sure.
We might turn on that switch. And we have every right to, because if we're involved in a certain area of land and all of a sudden we notice there's effects and cumulative effects because industry has came in and stepped in and did this and this and this, a long list, right? What do? We hold them accountable, right? And I'm sure that whole perception or idea has always been flushed out for a long time. But it helps companies do conscious decisions too. I mean, we can't just paint them with a black paintbrush either, because there's a lot of good work that they do and a lot of good technology that they're developing to help, relieve all this accumulative effects, right?
Right.
So, but at the end of the day, if a community notices that that's not happening, that there's no working with those nations and those industries are coming in to do the same thing over and over again that they've been doing since the 70s, well, yeah, you can see there's going to be a problem.
Right. If we actually haven't done anything to move forward positively.
That's right.
But, the war in Ukraine is changing how we look at energy again. All of a sudden, all of Europe was relying on Russian natural gas and the supply of the pipeline. Well, now Russia's kind of cut it off. Now they're starting to refire up some of these atomic plants in order to create energy. They're starting to explore coal again. They're going to need a way in order to power their communities. Well, hold on here. All of a sudden, it was the most dangerous thing in the world to ever have any of these other, energy supports. Well, I guess all of a sudden we have to re-justify. But I think it's important that we continue to look for ways to monitor the effects on our climate, to monitor our effects on our environment. And you're right. If this kind of lawsuit ends up continuing to force the awareness, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. But also companies out there, be conscious that these are Indigenous people.
Yeah.
And they have every right and almost a very sovereign right to be there, and work with them as best you can.
And I guess those two terms that we have to continue to use every time, consultation and engagement. Make sure you connect with the Indigenous population within the Indigenous communities. And in the case, don't forget to include the Métis in this conversation. Down in, there was, and it was recent, and I know we may have mentioned it before, but there was a baby woolly mammoth that was discovered in a mine that as they were doing work. And they ended up in this Indigenous community within this land, they ended up, capturing this, the body, the remains, as it were, that still had a lot of fur and hair. And it's connecting the community with the land. And it also reminds us there was animals, there was movement on these lands long time ago.
For sure.
So, we need to continue to recognize the fact that even within the landscape, as we continue to look for the artifacts to continue to prove that the Métis people were south, to continue to prove that here's where the Indigenous populations moved, here's how the animals moved. This is another reminder, and it's a good thing that it's bringing the community together to celebrate. This is history that was on their land as well. History that may even have been long before them.
Yeah, I mean, nature is a balance, right? And, certainly when they look at the animals where they were from the Ice Age, the land bridge, all those things, we know where people kind of migrated from, and they're here, or people that were originally here already had contact. And all this notion of discovery in the 1500s, well, I think it happened thousands of years ago,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think we need to quash that whole Columbus thing.
Yeah.
Because that to me is more of an issue than anything. This who actually discovered North America? Well, who uncovered it? And that's probably the best term. No one discovered this territory; it was already inhabited.
You're right. It was.
So
Yeah.
I mean, you can't just walk here and say, "Oh, I discovered that place." That was already there.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, Columbus using astronomy to convince people to give them all their food, and he worked the indigenous people.
Yeah.
And pushed them right to the edge. That was Columbus. That's who people celebrate.
Yeah.
As discovering this land. But people don't really need to research that history about Columbus, and they'll find it.
And it's funny. That's a great comment about the idea. These lands were here.
Yeah.
And who does? How do we celebrate? And is it so much that we're celebrating, or just recognizing, thank you for having brought your people over? But let's be honest, there were people here before. Let's continue to celebrate the time that they had and recognize all these things. And don't lose the recognition.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, Cartier, people talk about him here in this part of this country. But I always look at, he didn't discover anything. There was already people here.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was waves of people coming from Europe prior to that. I just don't get it that they were the first people and then that was it.
Now, this is poke at ourselves, but did the Red River Cart Trails happen because, hey, it looks like there's been a lot of buffalo going this way. They've created a trample path. Let's follow our carts along this road. What led our pathways of the Métis cart? Was it the best route forward? Did the buffalo help guide us through there? Because I don't think the buffalo are going to take the highest hills over. Maybe they're taking the path. Maybe we got to thank the buffalo.
Well, in terms of our use of the land, it wasn't about buffalo. It was about furs.
Right.
And the best trail was through the Hudson's Bay, but you needed a ship to get there, right? If you went to the St. Lawrence Seaway and you had to converse over the mountains and the terrain to get to where the river basin system was, it would take you years to it's not years, but certainly months to get there. Versus you going right into Hudson's Bay straight down, you hit right to where York Factory is, you hit the river system right there. And that takes you all the way to Mississippi and Oregon quite easily, right? So that's the prime route for trade. And the fur traders knew that. They were smart enough to know where the river systems were and where it would take them. And then the cart trails sort of came after that.
In New York, you can pay to own a certain level of height. You can own the height around your building. That way other people can't build and block your view. If anybody can help us lay claim to a certain direction of waterway within the basin, that way if any boats go over, we get to collect tariffs.
Yeah.
That's what we should be going back, Lawrence. We should be looking back. How do we collect tariffs for anybody who's gone across our fur trade routes?
Well, the first steamship operators were all Métis guys, right?
I didn't know that.
So, yeah, I mean, even Batoche, we that same steamship that they took down in Batoche during the fight was their own. It was the thing that they navigated with. But the Army used it, and then they sunk it. Right?
Well, and that leads us into Lawrence's Métis Minute. I've been reading a little bit recently. Take us through Thomas Scott and the relationship of how that led to Louis Riel's demise.
Well, I mean, Thomas Scott was an Irish Protestant from Ontario, a lot of Orangemen that were sort of originated from. But he was one of the first inhabitants of the Red River. But when he was there, was disrupting all the meetings, all the Métis sort of gatherings. because they were at that time still speaking about being a Métis nation.
Yeah, he didn't have much good to say
No.
about the Métis people.
But, when he was arrested and kind of took it in and Riel kind of spoken on his behalf, they decided to execute him.
Mm-hmm.
And they used that information in Ontario, Canada did, to go, well, now we got to get rid of the Métis. Before it was like, we need to speak to them.
Yeah, it seemed as though there was a
switched.
relationship there. And then when this happened, because it seemed as though, based on the reading, that this was a relatively violent individual, had complete negativity against any of the Métis community. This should be eradicated. Colonialism is moving forward. So here he's been arrested because of a number of times related to the fights in Fort Garry.
Mm-hmm.
And now that provisional government said, well, we see that your actions as treasonous.
Yeah.
And he was executed.
Yeah,
You're
that's right.
So now the government of Canada goes, well, who made that decision?
Yeah.
Now we're laying blame against you for your actions.
You got to remember, during that time, the majority of Parliament was full of Orangemen.
Ah, okay.
Right. So it only catered to their politics that, yes, we need to get Riel out of that territory, which gave them the basis for setting up the Red River Expeditionary Force, bringing them in, getting other forces all across this territory to help assist. And that's when the dark years started to happen.
Right. And then when Riel came back, and now they had something leverage against him, saying, well, you were part of this execution. We're using this as one of the reasons why we see you as guilty against the actions against Canada.
That's right. And that was, something happening in 1870 and then 1885. So those were the two sort of times of Riel's demise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And certainly that first part, 1870, but that Thomas Scott thing was really the antithesis for the behavior to change and go against the Métis.
The Métis community.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that, Lawrence. I've heard this name before, and it was one of those, I hadn't had a strong awareness. I always thought it was just the provisional government relationship that drove out Louis Riel, but his actions that needed to be, because now he's being essentially chased, but here he comes back in order to try and push. So this is the part of history that we get to read. It's not really somebody we get to ask about it. You're reading about it.
Yeah, well, it always goes back to that, that English, Irish, Protestant kind of wars, right?
Right.
And then happening in Canada. There was still that division happening here.
Mm-hmm.
But then when that happened, certainly the British system went against Riel as well as the Orangemen at the same time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, because Riel was kind of a French advocate too, they kind of seen that as an enemy also.
Well, and it's our part to share to get people's conversation going, Lawrence. No, I really appreciate that. Let's jump into the new iWatch. I'm an Apple guy, always been an Apple guy. I'm always trying to figure out a reason to buy an iWatch. But I don't know if I want to know my health that accurately, that closely. And it always feels like I carry my phone around. Isn't it just a bigger watch?
Well, I've had the iWatch for a while. But if it finds a deviant thing in your pulse, it'll tell you. But it'll also tell you to go seek medical advice. It doesn't say take me as the doctor, right?
Yeah.
But it does have its use. I don't know about tracking. Maybe I'm contributing to AI by wearing it. I don't know. Probably am.
Probably Métis AI.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know what that'd be, but it would be telling us the best type of pemmican to eat.
They're going to reproduce me. One day I'll walk in the office. There'll be another me sitting there.
Yeah.
Right. But
hopefully one that works harder.
Well, it's true. Then I can finally retire.
Or one where I could color your beard. Wait a minute. There's a Lawrence with a gray beard, and there's a Lawrence. It'd be just like Star Trek with Captain Kirk, where there was more than one. It's like, which is the real one? I'll have to be the guy who figures it out.
Well, they are. They're making things now with AI. Like they're reproducing Elvis. I seen Elvis the other day. AI. He looked real.
Oh, that's true. And I even saw it was the Whitney Houston hologram.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I like it.
Right. And then who's that? Will Sasso. He has a podcast now with a friend of his. and they don't do any preparation. They use AI as their preparation.
Really?
So the AI tells them what to talk about.
What to talk about.
Also tells them what, all these different things to do during their podcast.
Like raise your hand, turn your head.
Yeah.
Turn your head and cough.
Tells them to like, smoke a joint, so they do that. And then they have their podcast. Then they talk about certain subjects and I guess it follows them, their logic online because they're on social media. So it knows what they think. Like, it's very strange.
Oh, goodness. I hope it doesn't know what I think right now. Big shout out to Canada, the women's hockey team, for winning against the U.S. 2-1 game. I hope I didn't spoil it for anybody. Yes, so now they're carrying the title for another year. And Blue Jays are on a tear.
Finally. But I mean, like I said, everybody has to stay healthy. Pitching has to be 100%. I'm sorry, but Kikuchi, every time he pitches, the team goes...
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's why they've just moved him to sort of a reliever kind of position every now and then. Yeah.
But it seems like that pitching staff really have faith in the guy.
Yeah.
And everyone watching goes like, oh no, he's pitching tonight. This is it.
Yeah. And that's sports. So our thoughts and our prayers with the families in Saskatchewan and anybody who's affected. And let's hope most of this craziness comes to an end. Yes. Big shout out again to the women's hockey team. Make sure you look up some of the Indigenous sports that are happening within our communities. Look up all the information. Make sure you continue to email us at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca, or you can get Ross or Lawrence at thesqueakywheel.ca. I have a new song that's coming out next week. Hopefully I'll get it on the radio soon. It's called Highway of Dreams. I don't know if I was supposed to tell people that yet, but it's coming out. I'll try to get Leighton to throw it up on our website. Make sure that you continue to connect with our community and keep the wheel squeaking, folks. That's the reason Lawrence and I are here. The president, the captain, from all of us here, from behind the scenes, best wishes. Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the president, Lawrence Gervais, MMA Region 3, and the captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.